Viewers, aji Nagaland News Network yade chumukidima police complex te ahigana ase aro aji laga program de saishugule Regional Conference of Heads of Anti-Narcotics Task Force of Northeastern States including Sikkim aro West Bengal khan yade ahigana tahan idu drugs abuse khan noilu drugs smuggling noilu idu drugs trafficking idu khan la opor de luigana tahan solutions khan bisari gana problems khan nijor alag alag states tiwa anigana tahan idu la opor de discussion khan kuri gana jawole la ekta conference tahan thakala mon janyo paise edi saishugule mon la DGP Rubin Sharma bi attend kuina thakala mon tikyo paise aro alag alag dignitaries kan bi bishi ahigana ase from different states to edu la program do aji laga tahan kinaka goina lui jawole se edu la opor de luigina I bi mon details te salo.
It is a privilege to host this crucial conference today in Nagaland, alongside the Narcotics Control Bureau in Colombo. A small bilateral between Manipur and Nagaland, facilitated by the Narcotics Control Bureau in August 2025, which was very successful, prompted me to request the Director, Narcotics Control Bureau and BPR&D to consider a conference for the ANTF for the Northeast. They immediately agreed, and we see ourselves here today. We should look at ourselves not just as representatives of the law enforcement community, but also the country's frontline defenders against a menace that threatens the very fabric of our society, the narcotics trade. The Northeast region is the pivot of India's fight against drugs. Our proximity to the Golden Triangle means that we are facing a sustained and systematic assault on India's public health, a public health emergency which is slowly unfolding and silently exterminating a whole generation. The long and porous 1643 kilometer border with Myanmar, combined with challenging terrains and governance turmoil in Myanmar, makes the Northeast states, including Nagaland, extremely vulnerable. Drug trafficking and use are no longer merely a law and order issue. They are a direct threat to India's internal security and the future of our youth. The Indo-Myanmar border is largely unfenced, enabling unchecked foot treks and vehicle crossings for the drug use. Proximity to the Golden Triangle and the restricted movement regime allow free visa crossings which are exploited by traffickers, blending with their ethnic kin on both sides. The drugs and drug money flowing through these routes are not benign. Our investigations and operational intelligence-based inputs indicate that some of this illicit trade feeds the nexus of organized crime, insurgency, and narco-terrorism. Though the insurgent groups have denied any organized and organizational involvement in narcotics trafficking, large numbers of cadres are involved in drug trafficking at an individual level. From this perspective alone, dismantling of the drug cartels is synonymous with enhancing national security. The establishment of anti-narcotics task forces mechanisms was a visionary step to bring the necessary focus and institutional coordination that was long overdue. The enormity of the problem cannot be fathomed exactly. Only inexact estimations are possible. Nagaland has an estimated 1.2 lakh drug users, the opioid users, who consume heroin and brown sugar, locally known as shan flower or SF, because of its traditional origins in the Shan province of Myanmar. If we estimate a zero point 0.5 gram of consumption per person per day, and even if we take consumers as half of the actual numbers, which I have said is 1.2 lakh for Nagaland, we are looking at almost 30,000 grams or 30 kgs per day, or a whopping 10,000 kgs per annum being consumed in Nagaland alone. If we extrapolate this to 10 lakh users in the northeastern states alone, the figure comes to almost 1 lakh kgs per annum. Imagine if you were to estimate the quantities flowing or being filtered through the northeast to the rest of the country. It could be at least double the quantity, if not more. The northeast is a steady pipeline for drugs for India. The entire northeast law enforcement community hardly catches about 5,000 kgs of heroin or sugar or brown sugar per annum. The cost estimates of damage to the economy only by way of expenditure on drugs varies depending on what costing parameters or the location we used. Closer to Myanmar or in the mainland. Closer to Myanmar, this 1 lakh kgs would translate to almost 2.5 lakh crore rupees per annum. In the mainland, this would amount to almost 6 times this figure. I am not even counting the losses which accrue on account of the pressures on law enforcement, criminal justice system, the health and the medical system, and the incidental costs. Clearly, drug trafficking is not merely a crime. It is a public health emergency and a threat to national security and public order. I propose we focus on our collaborative efforts on issues like coordination, enforcement, and accountability. Coordination is the Achilles heel. With the law enforcement agencies, while the law enforcement agencies work within jurisdictional boundaries, the drug traffickers don't. This is where they outscore and outwit us. The lack of coordination is the biggest stumbling block. Coordination among agencies, coordination within agencies, coordination among the various pillars of the criminal justice system, coordination between the law enforcement and the civilian wings of the government and with the public. If we have launched a war against drugs, the war cannot be fought alone by anyone. It has to be a collective enterprise. Since most drugs enter India's northeast through Myanmar, it is but inevitable that different quantities and kinds of drugs get intercepted in different places and jurisdictions across the northeast and beyond. It would be unfair to presume that all civilians on the Indo-Myanmar border are involved in drug trafficking. However, it would be fair to presume that all seizures can potentially be tracked and traced back to some individuals or groups in the bordering areas. Unfortunately, down the supply chain, distribution and retail chain, we, the law enforcement community, have failed to investigate the links and chains up the ladder and up the pyramid with any degree of coordination. This means that we are only catching the users, retailers, couriers, and traffickers. Even these persons are only being arraigned in very few cases, affording them the liberty of immunity and impunity. Many of them are suppliers in multiple cases, multiple consignments which get caught, but we are unable to link these cases or connect the perpetrators. Resultantly, we end up spending more effort than is required in our interventions. There is a multiplicity of efforts which needs to be checked. This is our biggest drawback and needs attention. We perhaps need to move from a need to share to duty to share model. I propose that all arrests involving medium and large quantities should be followed up immediately with joint interrogations through video conferencing. preferably within 24 hours by all the Northeast states. The days of relying solely on human intelligence are over. Modern drug trade operates on the backbone of digital communications, whether it is communications per se or even financial transactions. For transactions, the traffickers rely on complex logistics and multiple channels. Adoption of technology by the law enforcement agencies urgently needs to scale up in areas like communication surveillance, communication analysis through CDR and IPDR analysis, darknet analysis, cryptocurrency tracking, digital forensics, big data analysis, and maybe even ethical hacking. Every state ANTF must have dedicated, centrally trained, specializing units for these areas. The Nidan platform shows that some data is being uploaded. However, the Nidan portal does not reflect all the information from investigations because law enforcement agents, officers usually hold back operational information, which is sometimes more important but remains undocumented and thus gets lost. This is the common operational picture which binds all of us. Targeting the kingpins is more important than targeting the street peddlers. Our primary goal should be to apprehend the financial facilitators, the handlers, and the kingpins who orchestrate and police the supply chains from across the border and into mainland India. This can only be achieved if we start working up the ladder rather than closing individual cases. Sadly, this rarely happens. At this juncture, two of the most important prerequisites should not be lost sight of. The method of dealing with drug users who are caught and are willing to undergo de-addiction and rehab, and the sharing of information about the supply chains of recovering addicts between the de-addiction and rehab centers and with the law enforcement. In the case of the latter, which means sharing of information between the de-addiction and rehab centers and law enforcement, one has to acknowledge that a balance between right to life and privacy has to be fostered. The veil of privacy should be lifted. Even the Puttaswamy judgment provides for the veil of privacy to be lifted for legitimate aims like national security, public order, protection of public health and morals, which are the exceptions given in the judgment. There is a dire need for creating this integration and feedback loop with the de-addiction centers and the rehab centers. Our field operations must reflect a unified regional and national approach. Our operations must be institutionally supported and focused rather than being pushed by individual initiatives. Interstate coordination. The Narco Coordination Center, the NCORD mechanism, and ANTFs must try to focus on preemptively sharing intelligence and investigation inputs on traffickers, financiers, peddlers, couriers, the vehicles used for trafficking, the vehicle fabricators, mule account holders, conspirators, and changing routes, especially those which switch between Assam, Manipur, Mizoram, and Nagaland. This can be done laterally or through the Narcotics Control Bureau. The influx of synthetic drugs, particularly meth, yaba tablets, and barbiturates, is rising rapidly. We must remain highly vigilant using drone and satellite mapping to identify and destroy nascent illicit cultivation of poppy in certain tracts of Myanmar and Arunachal. Financial investigation. Following the financial trail is the most effective way of crippling the cartels. I urge all state ANTFs to form specialized squads dealing solely with tracking hawala links and financial transactions related to narcotic seizures and arrests. Like CDRs, the digital footprints, the banking data is unadulterated and unpolluted form of information. Its analysis can be extremely useful in identifying syndicates, even if they switch off their mobile phones or communication channels. Criminals cannot change their past. The mule accounts are important cogs in the wheel and function as cutouts for the organized syndicates. Dealing with banking channels is important. Obtaining bank details, freezing accounts, bank statements, UPI IDs, obtaining KYC details, and even suspicious transaction reportings are essential. While reports from FIU are comprehensive, but they are time consuming. The banks themselves have expressed their inability to share information on holidays and weekends. This is surprising because while banking now is a 24 by 7 affair, their law enforcement interface is only 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., that too only on working days. The banks need to be pushed to adopting a model similar to the telecom service providers, where nodal officers can furnish details within 60 to 90 minutes on a 24 by 7 basis. There is no substitute to disruption of the financial networks. Attachment and forfeiture of properties are culturally sensitive issues in the Northeast, but will have to be done in the due course. Our efforts are fruitless if the legal process fails. A logical conclusion and successful prosecution are necessary. However, our investigators, prosecutors, and judicial officers alike almost inevitably falter at this, especially where the registration of FIRs for preparation, attempt, and criminal conspiracy for committing drug trafficking offences are involved. These, again, are our weakest links. Offences are not documented at preparation, attempt, and conspiracy stages, and the other co-conspirators, except the ones who are caught, are not included in the police reports, that is the charge sheets. We must find a way of channelizing our intelligence-based inputs, especially those based on communication intercepts, into FIRs rather than waiting for seizures. Not doing so leaves gaps in interstate and interagency coordination as vital leads to investigation and follow-up by other sister agencies are lost track of. We need to build up these mechanisms. I propose that we start building and sharing common databases on profiles and photographs and biometric identifiers of criminals, suspects, co-conspirators, financiers, mule bank accounts, couriers and transporters, which means vehicle transporters and also fabricators. Criminals and suspects and under trials on bail or parole, and make these databases accessible on pre-authenticated mobile phones in a decentralized manner. We in Nagaland Police have created some databases which we shall be happy to share and provide access to all states in the Northeast and Narcotics Control Bureau. However, the principle of ego applies, garbage in, garbage out. I would like to take this opportunity to circulate a short questionnaire for all agencies to know what sort of data exists individually with all of you, so that we can synergize better and we can create a common platform for sharing of data. ITCID Vikram will share a small sheet. Grateful if you can fill up those. And in addition to that, what we have included, if you have any other databases or you want to suggest anything, please make us more known towards the end. Capacity building like specialized training and continuous training are essential, and creation and upgradation of infrastructure are important. The NCB's efforts in providing capacity building are appreciated, but we need more localized trainings on specifics of the NDPS Act in the context of Northeast unique challenges. A unique experiment we in Nagaland Police intend pursuing is the creation of an automated solution for transcription of lawful intercepts and voice calls and communications in partnership with the NIT Mizoram. This is at a very initial stage, but we are trying to pursue this. This AI-based and LLM model will help fill up the gap which exists in surveillance of targets, save time, and ensure that almost 100% attention of the targets under surveillance is accorded. Given the multiplicity of the languages and dialects in the region, this is an absolute necessity. We have also set up a network of automatic number plate reading cameras on the trafficking routes and have built up a healthy database of vehicles traveling and transiting Nagaland into Manipur and Assam. This has been reinforced by adding watch lists of suspected vehicles and phone numbers, and we intend buttressing it with facial recognition technology. For all the other states of the Northeast, we can offer to help you by diving into the database and check whether any suspected vehicle from your states are entered into Nagaland or passed on over into Manipur. However, our jails are a vulnerable meeting point for traffickers and their family members. A lot of the family members are co-conspirators. We need to plug this loophole by strengthening the security of the jails in the Northeast. The permissibility or the permissiveness of the society, the closed nature of the society gives a lot of leeway for people to meet on a bi-monthly basis. I think this needs to be plugged in the jails. Our jails in the Northeast would actually be fertile grounds for arresting co-conspirators when they go and meet the accused who are in the jail, whether it is the under trial prisoners or the preventive detention. As law enforcement, our duty is to reduce supply, but the crisis demands a humane approach to demand. We must intensify awareness campaigns, collaborate with the NGOs, churches, and civil society, and ensure that rehabilitation and harm reduction centers are adequately supported and coordinated with our law enforcement agency efforts. A recovered addict is a success story for the community and a defeat for the cartel. Some of the challenges that we face, in addition to what I've mentioned, is narco-terrorism nexus finances insurgent groups through drug revenues both at individual and institutional levels. Linkages between drug syndicates and arms smuggling create hybrid threats with weapons traded for narcotics in Manipur's ethnic conflict zones. Non-state armed groups in Myanmar control production labs, spilling instability onto the Indian side. Poppy cultivation resurgence in Myanmar post the 2021 coup funds anti-insurgency in India. Trafficking convergence with human smuggling, especially the practice of pawning family members, relatives, and associates for drug trafficking and gain are common modus operandi. Youth unemployment and limited access to education as opposed to literacy in tribal areas drives recruitment into trafficking networks as low-level couriers in Nagaland, Manipur, and Meghalaya. Traditional tribal governance structures as community vigilance against local peddlers is important. However, allowing too much leeway to tribal bodies, NGOs, also creates its own set of problems with parallel justice delivery systems which subvert government authority and prevent flow of information to official channels, hindering a coordinated response and thereby creating parallel channels which can be used for trafficking. A couple of reforms or changes that I want to emphasize on. The NDPS Act has not undergone any major structural changes since 2014. I think we need to include conspiracy to traffic as a separate offence with deterrent punishment, create statutory provisions for plea bargaining in exchange of actionable information on bigger networks, and remove provisions which hinder investigation, for example, production of electronic evidence. The issue of controlled delivery operations, I think we need to look at a controlled delivery operation so that entire networks can be unearthed. Besides that, the NDPS Act would also have provisions for witness protection within the Act itself so that a holistic view can be taken. Then creation of a dedicated Northeast anti-drug trafficking agency or authority or something for coordination with probably a DG rank officer and pulling on manpower from all the Northeast states, and the NCP representatives would be a good idea. Strengthening of the forensic infrastructure because forensic reports do take a lot of time, and those are fertile ground, those are easy grounds on which people can secure bail. In addition to that, the reward policy which exists, the Government of India, the NCB's policy which exists, I think needs to be made a bit more practical so that rewards are much more easier to accord, and the rewards should be based not just not just on the quantity of seizures, quality of seizures, but also the quality of information. I think we need to look at that. Another policy level intervention pertains to the Patent DPS Act and interventions in preventive detentions. A set of guidelines from MHA do exist, but there is an urgent need to standardize the procedures, the timelines, and interpretations of the provisions by different states and bring about uniformity in the light of court judgments. There is a recent judgment of the Supreme Court in a case pertaining to Nagaland and West Bengal, where the Honorable Supreme Court has said that the grounds of arrest and all accompanying documents on the basis of which a detention has been made have to be provided to the detainee in the language that he understands. So imagine having to translate all the documents in all the dialects that they understand in this region. It is a humongous task. Preventive detention is a potent tool of use and misuse. Non-use of preventive detention makes us toothless, and excessive use leaves room for criticism. However, excessive use is also a pointer to the failure of the criminal justice system, where the law enforcement community feels that the criminal gets justice at the cost of public good. A balance needs to be struck by devising guidelines. In the end, let me say that this conference is not just an opportunity for sharing achievements, but also sharing our problems with each other, sharing the solutions devised individually by the states and the law enforcement agencies, and the unresolved issues which need to be escalated to the national level. The conference is a fertile ground for improving interagency and interstate cooperation and coordination among stakeholders. The battle against drugs is a prolonged war fought on challenging the frontiers. I reiterate the commitment of Nagaland Police and its ANTF to collaborate unconditionally with the Ministry of Home Affairs, the NCB, our sister agencies in the region. Let us commit today to raising our collective performance, targeting the big fish, and securing the future of the Northeast for a drug-free India. I thank the Ministry of Home Affairs and the NCB and all other participants for their continued guidance and leadership in this mission. As a parting shot, I recently participated in an event organized by the Guwahati High Court for the National Legal Services Authority, the Legal Aid, for all Northeast states, West Bengal and Jharkhand. The event was attended by Chief Justice of India designate Justice Suryakant, senior judges of the Supreme Court of India, and Chief Justices of all High Courts. I was able to succinctly and tersely put forward my views and those of the law enforcement community. They listened patiently. As a parting shot, again, I would like to propose a workshop where the law enforcement community, the prosecutors, forensics, and the judiciary would come together on a platform and decide to act in uniform. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Viewers, man visual sthiti ki banishna heads of anti-narcotics task force kan sop alag states kan ba northeastern states aro Sikkim aro West Bengal kan diwawi ahegena tahanye de conference thakala mohan tikyo bai se regional conference itu de Nagaland la TGP Rupin Sharma taiwa dala speech te kwa laka mohan hunyo pai she ki itu laka conference regional conference to goishugla celebration ekta no hoigena aro achievements kan discuss kuina chaule la no hoigena hoilebi tahan nichor laka alag states northeastern states West Bengal Sikkim kan milai gana dan problems sharing kan guri gana idula opportunity lui gana discuss kurle nimete aro solution kan pisharule itu ekta conference kurle dile palo gana tai itu kwalabi mohanjanyo paise aro edu India do enaga solution kan bisari gana nijor la problems ani gana tackle ditahan discussion guri gana India do drug free India panawole nimite tahan kam kurina jawo aro kutha kurina jawo kina kwala mon hunio paise aro taiwa idu statistic saishugule drugs kan consume gura to Nagaland la ekla di saishugule per annum te 10,000 kg nishna do ta Nagaland ekla de consume kuri ase kuina tai itu kan bi state kuina kwala mwandala speech de dikho paise itu sopla oborde luigena ajila regional conference to tahan itu solution kan bisarule aro Indo Myanmar border kan area de itu border areas kan de northeastern states fale tahan itu kinaga security kan kina strengthen kuro itu kan sopla oborde luigena tahan itu discussion do kurina jawo koina mohangi itu janai disha ajini mede man hese this is Jimishu with camera person Tamjan for Nagaland News Network.